Do you believe it was man-made or genetically modified?
Look, the best experts so far seem to think it was man-made. I have no reason to disbelieve that at this point.
Your Office of the DNI says the consensus, the scientific consensus, was not man-made or genetically modified.
That's right. I agree with that. Yeah, I've seen their analysis. I've seen the summary that you saw that was released publicly. I have no reason to doubt that that is accurate at this point.
Okay, so just to be clear, you do not think it was man-made or genetically modified?
I've seen what the intelligence community has said. I have no reason to believe that they've got it wrong. Martha, you have to put this in context. Here's what's important, Martha. Here's what's important. The Chinese Communist Party had the opportunity to prevent all of the calamity that has befallen the world. And here we find ourselves today. You and I were talking about we haven't seen each other physically for a long time. That's true of people all across the world. This is an enormous crisis created by the fact that the Chinese Communist Party reverted to form, reverted to the kinds of disinformation, the kinds of concealment that authoritarian regimes do. Had those scientists been operating in America, they would have put this out, there would have been an exchange of ideas, and we would have quickly identified the kinds of things that needed to be done in response. Instead, China behaved like authoritarian regimes do, attempted to conceal and hide and confuse. It employed the World Health Organization as a tool to do the same. These are the kind of things that have now presented this enormous crisis, an enormous loss of life, and tremendous economic cost all across the globe. The Australians agree with that. You hear the Europeans beginning to say the same thing. I think the whole world is united, understanding that China brought this virus to the world.
I mean, at least take a breath before contradicting the thing you just said on national television. This is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo having a little bit of trouble keeping his story straight, which I guess is the risk you run when everything you say is steeped in partisan politics and no actual facts. In a matter of 15 seconds, he says, quote, "The best experts so far seem to think it was man-made," before getting confronted with the fact that the Director of National Intelligence said it wasn't man-made, to which Pompeo replies, "That's right, I agree with that." Yeah, this would probably be the part where Trump brags about having hired the best people. Now, despite Pompeo's claims that, quote, "the best experts so far think that this was man-made," that couldn't be farther from the truth. Not only do the vast majority of the world's public health experts and epidemiologists believe that the virus was organic and not man-made, but most of Trump's intelligence officials do too. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said, quote, "A majority of the views right now is that the virus is natural, it was organic." And the Office of the DNI released a statement saying, quote, "The intelligence community also concurs with wide scientific consensus that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified." But Pompeo doesn't care about any facts. He doesn't care whether coronavirus was created in a lab or if it came about organically. None of that is his concern. His concern is saying anything, literally anything, regardless of whether it's contradictory or not, so long as he can try and incriminate China in the process. That's all this is about. It is nothing more than a political maneuver to shift the blame away from Trump and onto the Chinese. So if that means giving oxygen to a conspiracy theory that it was cooked up in some lab, sure. Also, if that means contradicting that exact same conspiracy that you just embraced only 15 seconds earlier, that sounds good too. Now, to be clear, China deserves fault here, no question about it. They should be held to account for suppressing information about the outbreak. But by that same logic, the Trump administration is at fault too for doing that exact same thing. Listen to the reasons why Pompeo blames China.
China behaved like authoritarian regimes do, attempted to conceal and hide and confuse.
Now, I really want you to think hard here. Does that sound familiar for any other government? For weeks, if not months, Trump pretended that the outbreak was no big deal in an effort to protect the stock market. He said it was no different than the flu, despite evidence that it was roughly 10 times deadlier. He said cases would soon be down to zero, even though not a single public health expert said any such thing. He said it was contained. He said it would miraculously disappear with the heat in April. He said anyone who wants a test can get a test. He said states should be liberated from stay-at-home orders meant to keep people safe. And so when Pompeo castigates China for concealing and hiding and confusing, he might as well be talking about his own boss. The only difference being Trump's behavior occurred while over 1 million Americans were contracting the virus and over 60,000 Americans were dying. If this administration had a shred of responsibility, rather than propping up baseless conspiracy theories about the virus being cooked up in a lab in China, rather than continuing to blame someone else for an outbreak that's been in the United States for nearly 5 months now, they would acknowledge the fact that what happened within the United States after it got here was not China's fault. Our government's job is not to stomp its feet and point fingers, it is to keep us safe. It is to be prepared for the inevitability that something like this would happen. It is to take swift and decisive action at the advice of experts and medical health professionals about what can be done to save the most lives possible. But none of that happened because Trump's priority wasn't the American people, it was the S&P 500. And no amount of gaslighting by Trump or Mike Pompeo or anyone else in this administration is going to change that reality.